I'm sure most of you watching this are familiar with the concept of rare enemies in video games. Kind of a weird concept when you think about it. Why design an obstacle that the player might not even see? Well, once you look at how a lot of these rare encounters are designed, you'll start to get a better picture. There are a billion different examples I could use, but for the sake of this video, I'll be mostly sticking with basic ones that most people will recognize. At least within my audience. Before we do that though, we should lay out what really defines the rare encounter archetype. What makes them rare? What makes them worth it? Well, the answer to that first question is elusiveness, either due to scarce encounter rates, their tendency to run away from you, or both. The answer to that second question is two things actually. The immense reward for defeating them, and just the fact that it's a unique encounter. No better example to start with than the Metal Slime from Dragon Quest. They have really high defense and are very likely to run away from you. Obviously, over the years, the Dragon Quest series would end up creating several different variants of the Metal Slime, but they all generally fall under the same gimmick. If you can defeat them before they escape, you get a ton of experience points. Needless to say, but it exemplifies the three criteria we laid out and is basically a precursor to every other example we'll be looking at in this video. While we're on the topic of classics, we might as well talk about Final Fantasy. Now, unfortunately, I've never actually seen any of the rare encounters in Final Fantasy outside of FF2's Iron Giant, and I've never really heard people talk about them either. But they do exist. I guess that's a testament to how elusive they are. A lot of odd encounters I've seen are more area-specific encounters that can be triggered just by using a siren. And even if you count that, I'd argue they're better known for their insanely rare item drops than for the encounter itself. Hell, you could probably make a whole separate video about rare item drops. But there's one example that everyone's gotta know about, even if you haven't played it. The War Mech from Final Fantasy I. It's a 1% encounter rate on the final floor of the Sky Castle. Like, the floor that's literally just a hallway to the boss of said dungeon. Not only is it in a super specific location, but also one where you're probably not actively looking for encounters. For most people, you're not likely to ever see it unless you take the time to hunt for it. Like Nintendo Power Contest winner Chris Houlihan, who photographed his encounter and was rewarded with his own secret room in Zelda Link to the Past. However, there were definitely kids who got really unlucky and got wrecked by this thing right before they were about to fight Tiamat, resulting in playground rumors of the sort. Come to think of it, discounting the whole Nintendo Power Contest, this was pretty clever for the time. This was back before everyone had the internet, so you could essentially gaslight players into wondering if your game's secrets even existed or not. You know, for its time, I think War Mech was pretty elusive and unique. As for the reward part, well, unless you were Chris Houlihan, the reward wasn't all that great. I mean, 8,000 experience and 32,000 gil is a lot by that game's standards, but not really worth the amount of effort it takes to win said encounter. This thing wasn't just infamous for being rare, it hits like a truck too. A lot of tutorials on YouTube straight up say to go up to near max level to beat it. At that point, you'd be more than strong enough to just beat the game, so the only real reason to win this battle is bragging rights. Now, if you want a game that gives very clear objective roles for defeating its rare enemies, look no further than the Kingdom Hearts games. Out of all the Kingdom Hearts games, I think Kingdom Hearts 1 Final Mix has the most amount of interesting rare encounters to talk about. They might not even seem super unique at first because their creature designs are palette swaps of existing foes, but what makes them truly unique are their methods of defeat. Every single one of them has their own gimmick, with some of them basically being straight up minigames that simultaneously take advantage of the battle mechanics. All of them drop synthesis materials, which you need to create a bunch of items you probably don't care about, but only after crafting all of those can you finally start creating the actual good items. among these being the often sought after Ultima weapon. It's hard to definitively say which one of these enemies has the best reward out of all of them, since ultimately all synthesis materials are required to eventually make the best stuff. So I guess we'll focus mostly on the unique factor as well as their elusiveness. Speaking of, here's the first encounter I thought of when I was brainstorming this video: the Stealth Soldier. This enemy is invisible, so it's not entirely clear when it spawned in. Easily the best contender in terms of elusiveness, however there is one detail you can spot that gives away whether it spawned in the room. You see, enemies spawn in waves, and the Stealth Soldier will only appear in a distinct enemy formation. This entrance hall in Hollow Bastion is the easiest place to snuff it out. As soon as you walk in, head to the center of the room to spawn the enemies in. If you see 2 fat bandits, it's not the right enemy formation. Leave and re-enter the room until you see only 1 fat bandit spawn in. That's your clue that the Stealth Soldiers have spawned in with it. Okay, that's great and all, but they're still invisible. How do I spot them? Well, despite being invisible, you can still lock onto them. Just press R1 and then use the L2 or R2 triggers to toggle targets until you're locked onto the Stealth Soldiers. They also temporarily become visible when you hit them. Just keep in mind they can still escape if you take too long to finish them. This next example is the one I find the most unique in terms of its creature design. This one actually isn't just a palette swap. Once again, it's not entirely clear when you'll encounter it. Unlike the Stealth Soldiers, they don't immediately spawn in with the first wave of enemies. You have to fight off several waves of White Knights, which is already an enemy that spawns there normally. However, you can still tell whether the special encounter has occurred by the succeeding waves that spawn in. If you're fighting wave after wave of White Knights, you know you got it. That's when you'll encounter it, the Chimera. It'll have several orbs spawning around it. The strategy here is to hit the orbs into it until its armor depletes. Then you can smack away at him to deplete its true health bar. Having the Eroga spell active can actually help expedite this process, as the barrier of your fully upgraded wind magic will passively deflect the orbs. The enemy's not too demanding, but has an extra layer to it where the player benefits from knowing certain properties of your spells. Overall, I think these enemies adequately pass on elusiveness and reward, but excel the most in their unique factor. Alright, time for me to talk about Atlas games for a bit. Unfortunately, the more modern Atlas RPGs aren't the most exciting cases to look at in terms of the rare encounter archetype. Persona 3 and 4 have gold hands. They're an uncommon field encounter you can stumble upon on any floor of Tartarus in Persona 3. In Persona 4, they can basically appear in any dungeon except the final one. They will try to run away as soon as they see you. Sneaking up on one isn't all too hard, but the encounter will always start with an enemy advantage. This gives the Gold Hand a chance to run away immediately, but it won't always do it on turn 1. The Gold Hand will resist everything except one element, and also has really high evasion. But if you just happen to hit it with the right attack, it'll go down instantly. I know they all look the same, but there's actually multiple variants of them. Their resistance will eventually evolve into immunity, and even reflect or absorb. Now, one of the oddballs here is Persona 3 FES specifically. In this version of the game only, not even the original that came out the year before it, the Gold Hands would basically die to any hit that connects, while still having that high evasion and high chance of them escaping. If I had to guess why they changed it in FES specifically, it's probably because Gold Hands are your only means of obtaining materials for weapon fusion, which was introduced in that version of the game. So I'm assuming they didn't want it to be too big of a headache to get the necessary items, otherwise it wouldn't seem worth it at all. Good call in all honesty. In Persona 3 not Reload, Gold Hands would give out no experience points, but drop a coin that can be sold for a lot of money. This would be in addition to the blank weapon bases, by the way. In Persona 4, they give 1 XP, which is still virtually nothing, but give a lot of money up front, no item selling required. In Persona 4 Golden, however, Gold Hands would start giving out a ton of XP as well, becoming the best grinding method in the game. This would also be the case in Persona 3 Reload. Treasure Demons in Persona 5 basically function the same way as Gold Hands in battle, except you can actually add them to your Persona stock and use them as fusion fodder. Depending on the arcana of the personas you're fusing, the Treasure Demons can either produce a stronger or weaker persona of that same arcana. They cannot be used in battle and can only be used in fusion, but they come with a bunch of skills you can pass through to the fused persona. I'm not counting the Reaper here because that falls more under roaming boss territory, and that could honestly be its own video. On the Shin Megami Tensei side of things, you've got Mitama from SMT 5. They are considered their own demon, but are primarily used for fusion purposes. Unlike Treasure Demons, however, they can be used in battle, but you probably don't want to. The method of defeat is the same as every other example we just went over except P3FS. Except because of SMT's turn penalties for enemy immunities, there's a higher risk. You do not want to lose all your turns and give them an opportunity to run. These are supposed to be kinda rare encounters, but there's actually DLC that makes them spawn more frequently, so that's a little bit shaky. Other than that, these all adequately check off the boxes for the rare encounter archetype, but they honestly don't do a whole lot more than the Metal Slimes of Dragon Quest. If you're looking for something closer to the War Mech of FF1, the Fiends in SMT4 fall more in line with that enemy type. They all spawn in specific areas of Tokyo, so I wouldn't consider them roaming boss material. But the odds of them spawning are actually quite low. Like, it can genuinely take you by surprise, and while I haven't played SMT If, I am aware that you can encounter the Law, Chaos, and Neutral heroes from SMT1 as very rare encounters. And coincidentally, or maybe not, the game actually considers these enemies to be fiends as well. They can also be obtained as guardians, but again, this is extremely rare. Okay, I know, I said I'd keep most of these examples basic, so let's come back down to earth now, shall we?
While the Mother series is known and cited for being weird and different among many contemporary RPGs, it uses a lot of the same archetypes where the genre got its start, such as the rare enemy. In Earthbound, there are the caterpillar enemies, which are both found in the deserts of the game. In both cases, once the party sees them, they'll just run away, and if you chase them down and green swirl them, you'll auto-win. And they drop a ton of XP, but what I find more interesting are the bean lanes in Mother 3. These little guys are more of an obscure enemy, and I wouldn't blame many players if they've never even seen one of these across several playthroughs. They only appear in this one little stretch of land in the Sunshine Forest. The first variety can be found in Chapter 1 with Flint, but I find them to be much more helpful when you encounter the black varieties in the latter half of the game. But even when you know where they are, they can be exceptionally hard to find, and can take several minutes to get even one to spawn. And on top of that, if you even encounter one, they'll just run away immediately. So you really have to make sure you encounter them from behind so you can get an opening attack on them and hopefully take them out before they can do anything. These black bean lanes drop 16,000 experience points, and are actually crucial to encounter during a speedrun of the game. I know this experience firsthand from when I learned to speedrun the series last summer for a video I was working on. You have to get these items called the enemy bufferizers, which double the XP yield from them. This makes them drop 32,000 experience points each. I say each because you have to defeat 2 in the run. It's genuinely crucial, as this nets your party about 10 levels each. You wanna know why I'm so familiar with this part though? Because in hour 5 of my speedrun of the game, it took me about 10 minutes to get both of these guys, only for my game to crash shortly after, forcing me to do it all over again and costing my run about 30 minutes. Stay obscure, you little cretin.
On top of being universally familiar, Pokemon is probably the poster child for rare encounters. My knowledge of Pokemon kinda dies off after Gen 4, so I won't be naming any examples beyond that. Besides, I want to talk about the ones that are the most memorable for me. Starting with the old classic. Abra is a very frail Pokemon that can only teleport away from battle on top of its relatively low encounter rate. If you do manage to catch this thing, however, the reward is quite great. Abra doesn't take all that long to evolve into Kadabra, and once it does, it becomes one of the best glass cannons in the game. Alternatively, you can trade that Abra with an NPC for a Mr. Mime. Not as much power or speed as Kadabra, but it's still pretty strong and has access to moves that Kadabra can't learn, primarily Thunderbolt. Personally, I like Kadabra better. That and the fact that Psychic types are insanely strong in the first generation games, so it fits the bill for being elusive and having high payoff. As for uniqueness, that's even more subjective here than it is with other RPGs. It depends on what you're looking for. Creature design? Type commonality? Lore? Well, Kadabra was supposedly a kid with psychokinetic powers until he went to sleep one night. Good enough. The Safari Zone also has plenty of classics. You can't battle Pokemon here and thus can't weaken them to increase your odds of capture. And of course, the rarest encounters are the ones most prone to running away, oftentimes on the first turn. As you can imagine, there are quite a few good candidates for this list. The first one I want to talk about is related to a childhood story of mine. When I was a kid, the first rare Safari Pokemon I ever caught was Kangaskhan. This Pokemon carries a baby in her pouch. A baby marsupial is called a Joey. Therefore, I came up with the perfect name for her. I named her Joe Mama. Kid me thought this was comedy gold, and you know what? I still think it's funny. I still name all my Kangaskhan Joe Mama. The encounter is elusive for sure, and I'd argue it is one of the more unique Pokemon of the first generation. However, I can't say the payoff is all that great. The normal types you can obtain outside the Safari Zone are honestly better than our dear Joe Mother. Not only that, but her competition also consists of normal types that do everything she can do better. Tauros is a physical powerhouse with much more attack, defense, and speed. Gen 1 Tauros might have become one of my favorite Pokemon after replaying these games. Chansey is a primarily special defensive wall. In the original games though, there was no separate special attack and special defense stats, it was all just one stat called Special. So Gen 1 Chansey ends up being a powerful special attacker too. So think of a Persona 2 or Digital Devil Saga magic build. And that's basically Gen 1 Chansey. Unfortunately, Chansey has one of the worst physical attack stats in the game, meaning it can't really take advantage of moves of its own typing, all of which are considered physical in the first generation. And long story short, Pokemon that use moves that match its own typing get a damage boost. Thankfully, Chansey can learn just about all the best special attacks in the game, with the only drawback being its low speed. The payoff for both Tauros and Chansey is much greater, and their scarcity is about the same as Kangaskhan. Now, unfortunately, Tauros is just a cow, which isn't exactly the most inspired design. So I think Chansey is the winner of all three criteria. Now that I think about it, that's probably what the devs intended. In the Fuchsia City Zoo, the tagline of Chansey's sign literally says, "Catching one is all up to chance." Now if you think the games are gonna get more fair with their encounters from here on, you got another thing coming. In Pokemon Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, there's a Pokemon that only spawns on a few select tiles in one specific river, and said tiles are completely random. You know what I'm talking about. It's Feebas. Elusive for sure. The payoff for this one is a bit different than what you'd expect out of other Pokemon. Sure, Feebas evolves into a pretty good Pokemon with combat advantages, but it also has a secondary payoff to it. The Hoenn region has these Pokemon contests. They're basically like Pokemon pageants. You have a whole other set of stats to compete for. One of these stats is Beauty, which just so happens to be the stat you need to max Feebas in to evolve into Milotic. So you get a Pokemon that's pretty good for battling, and one that can ace the beauty contest. Is it enough to justify the time spent finding this Pokemon? I don't know. One last mention I want to include is Munchlax, specifically in Gen 4. The only way to get it is through the Honey Tree mechanic that requires 24 real-time hours just to get one encounter. And there's only a 1% chance that it'll be a Munchlax. Yeah, a whole day, just for the chance to get one, and quite the minuscule one at that. And the payoff for it is, admittedly, one of the game's strongest normal types. But also, there are other strong Pokemon that are just way easier to catch. So, yeah, I'm not too sure about this one. Now obviously, there are countless other examples from hundreds of other RPGs that fit the rare encounter archetype, but odds are, they probably fall under the same criteria I based most of mine off. I feel as though dragging this video on any further would make it really repetitive. But if there's a rare encounter that you think is really worth mentioning, do me a favor. Tell me why you think it's so special. How does it stand out compared to other rare enemies? Did you use different criteria than me? Is there a magic fourth criterion I didn't consider? Well, I'm not gonna know unless you tell me. Don't just complain about how I didn't include it. Tell me more. It's not much of a discussion if I have to spoon feed you everything. And with that, my first video of 2026 is done. I don't really like telling people to subscribe, but I'm excited to show what I have in store for this year. So if you don't want to miss it, subscribe. It's free and you can always change your mind later. If you want to go the extra mile, you can support me on Patreon for as little as $1 and have your name included with these individuals on screen. I'm a lot more transparent with the making of my videos there, and you'll even get some bonus goodies like my scripts and my research material for bigger projects. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you soon, hopefully.